Rushing outside, he was met not with the usual pastoral calm, but with the raucous sounds of laughter, music blaring, and clinking glasses echoing across his fields. There, in his own yard, hundreds of partygoers milled about under colorful string lights and improvised tents. At the center of the chaos, none other than Karen. HOA Karen, the perennial party thrower, was orchestrating yet another so-called community celebration. Karen's signature smirk and perfectly manicured look were on full display as she proudly announced the festivities over her megaphone. She claimed the party was meant to bring neighbors together and uplift community spirit, but Tom knew better. For years, Karen had taken liberties on his property, treating his carefully cultivated farm as if it were a public park. Today, as he watched the intrusion with a mix of disbelief and simmering rage, a spark of defiance ignited within him. Tom wasn't a man who had ever backed down. He'd built his livelihood on hard work, cultivating his fields and running his modest farm stand with passion and pride. And now, seeing his property hijacked for one of Karen's over-the-top events was the last straw. He knew that if he was going to reclaim his space and send a message that his property wasn't for Karen's whims, he needed to do something bold, a spectacle that would flip the script entirely. With adrenaline surging, Tom hatched a plan. Instead of allowing Karen's party to continue as planned, he would transform his yard into something far more wild. A biker rally that would take the celebration to an entirely different level. It would be a no-holds-barred, roaring assembly of chrome, leather, and rebellious spirit. A rally that celebrated freedom and defied the constraints of an overbearing HOA. As the party raged on and Karen basked in her self-righteous authority, Tom prepared to unleash his secret weapon, a cadre of local bikers and his own determination to turn her orderly world upside down. This was his wake-up call, a moment to show that when you try to commandeer someone's property for your own self-serving party, the backlash can be as fierce and unforgettable as a roaring motorcycle engine at midnight. Crescent Meadows was the sort of upscale, gated community where every blade of grass was trimmed to perfection and every house adhered to a strict code of uniformity. Managed by a formidable homeowners association, the community prided itself on order and conformity, and any deviation was met with swift penalties. In this picture-perfect setting, one person stood out as the self-appointed enforcer. Karen Miller, or HOA Karen, as everyone in Crescent Meadows knew her. Karen, in her early 50s, was a walking embodiment of strict regulation. Always dressed in conservative attire with her hair meticulously styled and clipboard in hand, she patrolled the neighborhood with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Whether it was the color of a mailbox or the height of a hedge, Karen was quick to report any perceived transgression. Her passion for maintaining the community's pristine image left little room for creativity or spontaneity, and often it left residents feeling like their personal freedoms were being suffocated under layers of bureaucratic red tape. On the other end of the spectrum was Tom, a lifelong resident of Crescent Meadows who had always embraced a different way of life. Tom's farm, tucked away on the outskirts of the community, was his sanctuary, a blend of rugged independence and heartfelt tradition. Unlike the cookie-cutter homes that defined most of Crescent Meadows, Tom's property was a working farm where nature and innovation coexisted. His farm stand, brimming with freshly harvested produce and homemade goods, was a testament to his dedication and a vibrant splash of individuality in a sea of conformity. Tom's approach to life was marked by a deep respect for freedom and a belief that creativity should be celebrated rather than stifled. He had built his life with sweat and determination, and every aspect of his farm, be it the neatly arranged rows of vegetables, the well-worn paths between fields, or the charming little stand where he sold his goods, reflected his commitment to living authentically. For Tom, his property wasn't just a source of income. It was a canvas for self-expression, a place where he could innovate and share the fruits of his labor with anyone who cared to appreciate it. Over the years, Karen had made it her mission to impose her vision of order on every resident, and Tom's farm stand had often found itself under the lens of her scrutiny. Fines for unauthorized displays and complaints about inconsistent aesthetics were common. But Tom had always taken it in stride, believing that the vibrancy of his stand was exactly what the community needed, a reminder that life was meant to be lived boldly. Then, one fateful day, Karen crossed an unspoken line. Without any prior notice or permission, she decided to host a massive party on Tom's land. It wasn't just any party. It was a Karen-style extravaganza, complete with loud music, elaborate decorations, and an invitation list that seemed to include everyone in Crescent Meadows. For Tom, it was the ultimate violation, a blatant act of entitlement that reduced his property to nothing more than a backdrop for Karen's self-righteous display. The stage was set for a dramatic clash between two worlds: the rigid, controlled environment championed by Karen and the free-spirited, fiercely independent life that Tom had built on his farm. And as the unauthorized party unfolded right before his eyes, Tom knew he had to do something radical, a response that would not only reclaim his property, but also send a resounding message to everyone who believed in the right to live and express oneself without interference. The night of the party was a sensory overload, a mix of pounding music, laughter, and the clamor of dozens of guests reveling in Karen's orchestrated chaos. Tents were set up haphazardly among Tom's crops, and colorful lights strung between trees cast a surreal glow over the fields. The buffet tables, laden with food and drinks, were a stark contrast to the otherwise rugged simplicity of Tom's farm. Everything was arranged to impress, yet none of it belonged to him. It was all Karen's doing. Tom stood at the edge of his property, a mixture of disbelief and simmering anger in his eyes. For months, he had tolerated Karen's petty fines and arbitrary complaints about his farm stand. Little did he know that this was just the tip of the iceberg. But now, as he watched strangers trample on his carefully nurtured land, a fire of defiance ignited within him. He immediately began documenting the scene, capturing video footage of the party and every unauthorized installation on his property. Neighbors who had come to witness the spectacle started posting their own photos and comments on the community forum, many of them echoing Tom's outrage. "This is our land, not a party venue," one resident posted. The digital uproar was immediate and growing, with hashtags like hashtag MyFarmerRules and hashtag StopKaren trending locally. Tom knew that a simple complaint to the HOA wouldn't suffice this time. Karen had gone too far. She had not only overstepped her bounds, but had also disrupted the very essence of what his farm stood for, a haven of authenticity and self-reliance. Determined to reclaim his property, Tom began plotting his counterattack. He recalled an idea he had toyed with for a while, a plan to transform the party into something that would serve as a public rebuke to Karen's intrusion. The concept was as daring as it was unexpected. He would turn the unauthorized party into the wildest biker rally the community had ever seen. Over the next few days, Tom reached out to his old friends from the local biker gang, a group known for their love of freedom, roaring motorcycles, and a disdain for unnecessary authority. They had always respected Tom for his integrity and independent spirit, and when he explained the situation, they rallied around his cause. Plans were drawn up, dates were set, and soon, the stage was being prepared for a grand spectacle that would reclaim Tom's property and put Karen's overreach on blast. Tom meticulously organized every detail of the rally. He cleared a portion of the field, set up a makeshift stage, and even arranged for local bands to perform. His vision was to create an event that celebrated the rebellious spirit of those who dared to live differently, a stark contrast to the cookie-cutter life dictated by the HOA. He envisioned the sound of thunderous motorcycle engines, the flash of leather jackets, and a vibrant display of community solidarity. More importantly, he planned to ensure that every element of the rally was legal and fully within his rights as a property owner. Meanwhile, Karen continued her charade, oblivious to the counter-movement gathering on Tom's land. She paraded around the party, issuing orders and taking selfies as if she were the queen of Crescent Meadows. Her smug confidence was infuriating. Every time she boasted about her community-building efforts, Tom's growing band of bikers exchanged knowing glances. The irony was not lost on anyone. The very person who had repeatedly fined Tom for his creative expressions was about to witness her carefully constructed image crumble. As the day of the rally approached, digital petitions and online support swelled. Neighbors began sharing their own stories of how the HOA's arbitrary enforcement had stifled their lives. The rally wasn't just about Tom. It had become a symbol of resistance against a system that valued uniformity over individuality. Tom's social media updates, filled with behind-the-scenes photos of rally preparations and candid interviews with supportive residents, turned the tide of public opinion. The hashtag Biker Rally for Freedom quickly gained traction, and what started as a personal vendetta evolved into a community movement. The tension was palpable in every conversation at local cafes and online groups. The HOA board was forced to address the growing uproar. Rumors spread that a special meeting was being convened to discuss the incident. Yet, as the rally's momentum built, it was clear that even if the board tried to intervene, the power of public support and the sheer audacity of Tom's response would be impossible to ignore. Tom's final preparations included a detailed plan for the rally's opening act, a symbolic unveiling that would mark the reclamation of his property. He arranged for a dramatic display involving his bikers revving their engines at the break of dawn, the roar of motorcycles echoing across the fields as a declaration that his land belonged to those who respected freedom. Every element was designed to force the HOA and Karen to confront the reality that private property and creative expression were not privileges to be taken away. The rally day dawned with a palpable electricity in the air. As the sun climbed over Crescent Meadows, rows of motorcycles lined the main road leading to Tom's farm, their engines idling in anticipation. Social media buzzed with live updates, neighbors streaming video of the rally setup, close-ups of leather-clad bikers preparing for the event, and hashtags like Biker Rally for Freedom trending higher by the minute. Tom's transformation of his property was complete. The unauthorized party that Karen had thrown had been overrun by a meticulously organized biker rally that blended raw, rebellious energy with a clear statement of property rights. Everywhere one looked, banners proclaimed "My land, my rules, and stand up for freedom." The contrast was stark. The carefully orchestrated chaos of Karen's party had been repurposed into a vibrant celebration of independence and resistance. Local news crews converged on scene. Reporters captured footage of the rally's dramatic opening as dozens of bikers revved their engines in unison, sending a thunderous roar across the fields. Interviews with rally participants painted a picture of a community united against the petty tyranny of the HOA. "We're here because we believe in the right to live our lives on our own terms," one biker declared, his voice firm yet full of passion. "If you try to take that away from us, you'll have to answer to the roar of our engines." The rally was not just an act of defiance. It was a full-blown declaration that individual freedom could not be suppressed by arbitrary rules. Karen, meanwhile, found herself increasingly isolated from the unfolding celebration. Her attempts to regain control of her party were met with jeers and scorn. Security footage later revealed that, in a desperate bid to reassert her authority, she tried to disperse the crowd using her phone and a series of incoherent commands. But the more she tried to enforce her will, the more the community rallied around Tom's cause. Digital posts from the rally showed residents chanting, "Our land, our rules," as they paraded past Karen's meticulously manicured lawns. The HOA board, forced to confront the digital evidence and the overwhelming public outcry, convened an emergency meeting. Leaked minutes from that meeting revealed heated debates. Some board members argued that Karen's actions were necessary to maintain order, while others conceded that her interference had reached absurd levels. The internal divisions only fueled the rally's momentum. Online petitions demanding reform and accountability gathered thousands of signatures, and local influencers joined the conversation, praising Tom's bold stand for property rights. As the rally continued, the tension reached a fever pitch. Tom took to the stage, a raised platform constructed out of reclaimed wood, and delivered a heartfelt speech that resonated with everyone present. He spoke of the importance of freedom, the right to innovate, and the value of community when it comes together to resist injustice. "This isn't just about a party or a rally," he declared, his voice echoing across the field. "It's about reclaiming our right to live, work, and create on our own property. Today, we show that when someone tries to impose their will on us, we have the power to take it back." His words were met with thunderous applause and cheers that reverberated through the crowd. Digital evidence of every moment, from the opening revs of the motorcycles to the heartfelt testimonials of supportive residents, was broadcast live across social media. The rally became a symbol of resistance, a testament to the idea that creativity and individual freedom could triumph over oppressive conformity. Every shared post, every hashtag, and every comment amplified the message. Property rights are non-negotiable, and no one can take that away from us. Meanwhile, Karen's attempts to salvage her reputation fell flat. In a series of panicked social media posts and desperate phone calls, she tried to claim that the rally was a misunderstanding and that her intentions were purely to foster community spirit. But the evidence was overwhelming. The sight of dozens of bikers, the roar of engines, and the collective outcry of residents left no room for such feeble excuses. As the rally entered its final hours, the tension in the air was electric. Neighbors gathered around makeshift stages. Local news channels conducted live interviews with rally organizers, and the HOA board's emergency meeting loomed as the next crucial step. The battle lines had been drawn. What began as Karen's unauthorized party had now transformed into a movement that demanded that every resident's right to manage their own property be respected, and that no overzealous enforcer could dictate the rules of our lives. By the time dusk settled over Crescent Meadows, the rally had reached its climax. Every biker's roar, every chant of "our land, our rules," was a resounding declaration that the community would no longer be held hostage by petty fines and arbitrary restrictions. The digital dossier of evidence, now bolstered by live footage and thousands of supportive messages, would soon force the HOA board to confront the undeniable truth that the spirit of freedom and innovation in Crescent Meadows was unbreakable. The decisive moment came on a cool, clear morning at the Cedar Ridge Community Center, where the final public hearing was underway. The boardroom was packed with a mix of HOA officials, local law enforcement representatives, community leaders, and hundreds of determined residents, all gathered to decide the future of property rights in Crescent Meadows. With a calm yet resolute presence, Councilwoman Dana Lewis stepped up to the podium, her eyes reflecting the collective hope and determination of a community that had long been stifled by arbitrary rules. After a thorough review of all digital evidence, time-stamped security footage, detailed records of property use, and the impassioned testimonies of our residents, we have reached an inescapable conclusion. Councilwoman Lewis began, her voice resonating with authority. It is abundantly clear that the actions taken by Mrs. Karen Miller, who hosted an unauthorized party on private property, were not motivated by any legitimate concern for community welfare, but were driven by personal bias and a blatant abuse of power. Our community's rights as homeowners and innovators must be upheld. A heavy silence fell over the room as Lewis continued. Effective immediately, the HOA board will rescind all sanctions imposed as a result of this incident, and we will initiate a comprehensive review of our enforcement policies to ensure that the rights of every resident are protected. Today's decision is not merely about reversing an arbitrary fine. It is a resounding declaration that Crescent Meadows values freedom, creativity, and the sanctity of private property above all else. Her words struck a deep chord, and murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. At that moment, a respected community advocate, a stalwart defender of individual rights, rose to speak. "Today, we stand united as one," he declared, his voice firm and impassioned. "No resident should be forced to endure the tyranny of arbitrary rule enforcement. Let this vote mark the turning point in our community, a clear signal that we will protect our creative freedom and our property rights at all costs. We demand accountability, and we will not rest until every infringement of our rights is met with decisive action." His declaration was met with thunderous applause, uniting the room in a powerful call for reform. Following his speech, a senior officer from the local regulatory board presented the final dossier, a meticulously compiled record of all digital evidence, expert testimonies, and official reports confirming that my modifications were entirely legal and that Karen Miller's actions were an abuse of power. The evidence was irrefutable. The Internal Affairs Panel unanimously endorsed strict disciplinary measures against any misuse of authority, and the full report was scheduled for immediate public release to ensure complete transparency. Councilwoman Lewis concluded, "Let this resolution mark the dawn of a new era for Crescent Meadows, a community where every resident's rights are upheld and where public authority is exercised with fairness and integrity." Our vote today is a resounding declaration that we will not allow personal vendettas to dictate the rules of our lives. Together, we stand for justice, accountability, and the inalienable right to live freely and creatively on our own property. Her final words, delivered with unwavering conviction, sealed the turning point in our struggle for property rights and creative freedom. In that defining moment, as every face in the boardroom shone with determination and hope, the balance of power shifted irrevocably. The overwhelming digital evidence and the unified voice of the community forced the HOA board to take decisive action, a turning point that would forever reshape the governance of Crescent Meadows. The days of petty, arbitrary rule enforcement were over, and a future built on respect for individual rights was finally within our grasp. In the weeks that followed the historic vote, Crescent Meadows underwent a profound transformation. News of the rescinded sanctions and the sweeping reforms enacted by the HOA board spread rapidly through local media and on social networks, sparking impassioned debates about property rights, creative freedom, and community governance. Editorials in the local newspaper, with headlines such as "A New Dawn for Crescent Meadows" and "Community United for Creative Freedom," celebrated the decisive action taken to protect the rights of every homeowner. Hashtags like #PropertyRights, #NoMoreHBullying, and #ArtIsFreedom trended widely, reinforcing our collective determination to stand up against arbitrary rule enforcement. Town hall meetings and community forums saw record attendance as residents gathered to share their experiences and envision a future where local creativity was not only tolerated but celebrated. Neighbors, who had long been oppressed by rigid HOA regulations, now spoke proudly about their right to manage their own property and express their individuality. "Our land is our legacy, and we will defend it with everything we have," one resident declared passionately at a bustling meeting, his words echoing throughout the crowded room. The atmosphere was charged with hope, a promise that Crescent Meadows would always honor the creative spirit of its residents. Within the reformed HOA board and local regulatory bodies, swift changes were implemented. Senior officials, led by Director James Carter and Lieutenant Marcus Reed, launched comprehensive training programs on ethical conduct, cultural sensitivity, and the responsible management of community resources. Regular internal audits and transparent disciplinary procedures were established to ensure that every complaint would be scrutinized with fairness, and that no resident would ever again be subjected to arbitrary fines or undue interference. Our duty is to protect the rights and freedoms of every member of our community, Lieutenant Reed affirmed during a follow-up press conference, reinforcing our renewed commitment to justice and integrity. Community leaders and local civil rights organizations also mobilized to empower residents further. Workshops, public forums, and educational campaigns were organized to raise awareness about the importance of creative freedom and property rights. When we stand together, our voices are powerful enough to reshape our community, a local activist proclaimed at a town hall meeting, inspiring neighbors to unite and demand change. For me, the journey from confrontation to resolution was both deeply personal and profoundly transformative. My decision to fight back by transforming Karen's unauthorized party into a wild biker rally that reclaimed my property and celebrated our shared right to creativity had not only restored my independence, but had ignited a movement that resonated throughout Crescent Meadows. Neighbors, once silenced by fear of punitive measures, now found their voices and shared their own stories of resistance. The digital evidence that captured every moment of our struggle became a rallying cry for every resident who believed that property rights and creative expression were non-negotiable. Karen Miller, once the unchallenged enforcer of the HOA's draconian rules, was now reduced to a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that no one is above accountability when a community stands united for justice. Her influence waned rapidly as digital records of her past transgressions circulated widely, underscoring the need for reform and the dangers of unchecked authority. At a final celebratory event held in the Central Park of Crescent Meadows, residents, local officials, and community advocates gathered beneath the fading glow of the sunset. A large banner reading "Unity, Freedom, and Creative Expression" was unfurled between towering oak trees, and heartfelt speeches echoed with promises of a brighter, more inclusive future. Today, we celebrate our victory over arbitrary interference, a victory for every homeowner and every creative spirit in our community, Councilwoman Lewis proclaimed, her voice resounding with conviction. The standing ovation that followed was a powerful affirmation of our collective commitment to protect our freedoms and ensure that creativity and individuality remain cherished values in Crescent Meadows. As each new day dawned over our transformed neighborhood, the legacy of that fateful confrontation endured as a beacon of transformative change. The story of how HOA Karen's unauthorized party was turned into the wildest biker rally, complete with roaring engines, vibrant banners, and a resounding message of freedom, became a rallying cry for every resident who believed in the sanctity of private property and the right to live creatively. Every sunrise now carried with it the promise that in Crescent Meadows, truth, justice, and individual expression would forever prevail. In the end, what began as a personal battle evolved into a watershed moment for our entire community. We emerged more united, more vigilant, and more determined to safeguard our rights against any form of bureaucratic overreach. And as the sun rose each morning over our reclaimed neighborhood, it carried with it the promise that Crescent Meadows would forever be a place where freedom, ingenuity, and respect for individual creativity shone as brightly as the open road at dawn.